Hello and welcome to the Data Privacy Lawyer. My name is Funmi Owolabi and I'm the principal attorney at the firm. Today's review, we're going to be looking at these AI terms. So I'm just going to hover over the type of service. AI Search Inc. operates the iAsk.ai website service. Your use of this service is governed by the agreement. In order to use the service, you, the customer, must first agree to the terms. I'm just going to click it because it seems like the product is the site. So ask AI anything and receive a factual response from the world's most authoritative sources. Interesting. Wow. And it looks like it's for students. So the reason I just highlighted the fact that it's for students is in the US, there is federal privacy law associated with student personal data in some capacity. And then also for individuals that are minors. So if I was doing a review for this company, let's say they were my client, those are two things that I would go into this review of the terms, understanding. And the reason that's really important is I've talked a lot on the channel about geography. First of all, geography is very important. Now this says the worlds, right? I'm not going to take every single world literally outside of what is being provided by this particular company. It appears as if this tool can be used by academics globally, right? We're looking at each word. I think that these reviews are valuable for you to be able to understand from a privacy perspective what it is that a regulator may be looking for, or the types of insights they're going to look at if they are looking at the privacy posture of an organization. They've said here that you can receive information from the world's most authoritative sources. I'm going to presume, now I don't know this for a fact, if this tool is being offered globally. Now I'm in the United States, but I can access this, right? So at a minimum, they're going to be processing some type of information related to a US resident. Now, in addition to that, we see they've got some links. Let me click this. Concise, average, or detailed. So it looks like you can only enter in input, right? I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with each of these tools, but something tells me that it may be that you're also able to upload documents like a Word document or a PDF. I don't know that for sure. One of the things I do for my own personal intake form for the firm is I always ask about the products and services in depth. This one is just the Ask AI. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this review looking at the products, but I like to get a sense of a lot of the reviews. Most of the times with the privacy documentation, you don't really see in which geographies the products and services are being provided, but it really matters from a privacy perspective because the privacy laws vary country to country, geography to geography, country to country. Paste text or URL to some. Okay, this was what I was looking for. Now, I think it's really important to highlight this before we go back to the terms, because if you're using this tool offered by this organization, you can upload files. If these files contain personal data, that's something that this company's algorithm is going to ingest and process. Let's say, for example, you have my name on a Word document, and then you post into the text, hey, can you Google this law firm? And then you upload a document that contains my name. That is an activity that's considered processing, right? So this company is going to ingest that information. If this company is going to ingest that information based on the uploaded file, they are processing personal data. There are responsibilities under the law that this company now needs to meet because they process that information. Now let's go back to the terms. Okay, you may not use the service if you're a person barred from receiving the service under the laws of the United States. Now, I mentioned this earlier. Geography really matters. This, at a minimum, tells me that these services are provided in the United States, which is where I'm geographically located. And then it also says other countries, but it doesn't specify. If it had specified that the use of the service could be in, let's say, the European Union, then I would also be thinking about, privacy from a European perspective too. So if you ever decide to work with a privacy counsel such as myself, you really need to be specific about geography because it influences the type of legal guidance that you're going to receive when it comes to your privacy program. So essentially, you can't use it if you've been banned in the US or other countries, including the country in which you are a resident from. Now, you might be wondering, why did they use this specific terminology? They've used this terminology because a lot of privacy legislation follows where you are a resident of. For example, the CCPA in California, the threshold that must be met is if you are processing personal data belonging to residents of California, right? I am not a resident of California, so the CCPA would not apply to me. The reason this language exists in this term is because a lot of the privacy laws, they follow where you're a resident. And I think this is really crucial to talk about today because a lot of organizations, particularly where I practice, which is in the US, they believe that their obligations related to personal data is exclusive to where they're headquartered. But the privacy laws don't work like that. They work based on where you process information. So if you are processing the personal data, you're offering your tool in, let's say, Germany. and German residents are uploading information into your website in order to use your AI tool. They're uploading files that could contain information of other German residents. Your obligations when it comes to that activity are to the privacy laws in Germany, irrespective of the fact that you are headquartered in the US. So you need to be looking at your privacy program from that aspect and from that angle, and you need to work accordingly. All right, that's all I'm going to say about that. You may not use the service unless you're over the age of 13. Now, you might be wondering, why do they use this age, right? First of all, I will explain why. On the previous page, when we were looking at the tool, we saw that they now COPPA, the threshold for COPPA when it comes to responsibilities for organizations is if you are going to process the personal data of a child under the age of 13, you need to obtain parental consent. So the disclaimer here is you're not supposed to be using this service unless you're over the age of 13. What this business is trying to avoid is having to obtain that parental consent, because we already know that they operate, at least they're processing personal data in the US. You must be a human, okay? Account created by automated methods are not permitted. Now, I am very intrigued about this just because I really enjoy data protection. I am intrigued about whether or not there are technologies that are sophisticated enough to create profiles and use tools that are not human beings. But you know, technology is moving so fast in 2026. So I am very interested in seeing what's going to happen in the future, because this is a very interesting provision in these terms. You are responsible for the security of your passwords and for any use of your account. Let's talk about this. So let me tell you why I want to talk about this. Under the data protection laws, any piece of information that identifies you is considered personal data, right? That includes your password. Now, the reason I find this sentence to be very interesting is because in many of the US state privacy laws, there are obligations on businesses to safeguard data from a technical and organizational and administrative perspective. So yes, there's a responsibility that is placed on the users, but there's also a responsibility placed on this organization under the data protection laws in the US. So I think that this sentence could use a little bit of tweaking for clarity purposes. However, it may be that they have other documents here that I'm sure accompany these terms of use that are distributed to users of the service that may accommodate for that. When we do these reviews on YouTube, we're just looking at it from one perspective. There's a lot of details that are missing that I talk about that I would need clarity on to be able to opine, oh, this is the sentence that should exist, this is not. There's lots of details that are missing, but I still think it's valuable for businesses to understand what it is that is valuable in having a privacy counsel review some of the documentation that impacts your privacy program. Traditionally, the terms of use, this is not traditionally a privacy document, but just based on the review of the service, we know that there's personal data in scope. So if you've been on this channel like a long time, you've seen that generally a lot of the reviews I've done have been about privacy notices, cookie notices. We've done some AI notices too, but privacy impacts your entire organization. And I think it's valuable to have a privacy counsel review any documents associated with the service if it impacts personal data, which we know it definitely does in some capacity. All right, I really hope you enjoyed this review. If you have comments about what I've said, leave a comment below and I'll see you in another review.